Welcome back to the deep dive. You hand us the sources, the articles, the research, the notes, and our mission is always the same, to deliver the distilled essence of expertise directly to you, the learner.
We save you the hours, you get the insights.
Exactly. And today, we are taking on a genuinely foundational text. We're diving into Abdul Jabbar Al-Waily's profound exploration of ancient wisdom in Thus Spoke Confucius, Volume 1.
It's an extraordinary work. I mean, Al-Waily doesn't approach Confucius as some figure locked away in a history book.
Right, not just a historical curiosity.
Not at all. He treats him and the wisdom he represents as a luminous source. And that source demands what he calls profound discovery. It's something active, something we have to engage with.
So it's a living philosophy. And the book establishes this monumental framework. He argues that the success of any civilization really hinges on two non-negotiable steps.
That's right. High moral education and a really deep-seated work ethic. Those are the starting points.
Okay, let's unpack this blueprint for social harmony. Our deep dive today is focused entirely on understanding the philosophical triad that Al-Waily puts at the core of everything: faith, or iman.
Then ethics, akhlaq.
And finally, governance, or siyasa. And this isn't just some abstract philosophical exercise, is it? It's a structural analysis of how societies thrive, or how they fail.
Exactly. Al-Waily sets the stakes immediately. His core argument is that the moral fiber of a society is not a pleasant afterthought that you get to after you've achieved economic growth.
It's not a luxury item.
It is the prerequisite for any meaningful, lasting success. We are tracking a revolutionary idea here, that individual virtue translates directly, and I mean inevitably, into political stability and societal peace.
So if the individual unit is compromised,
If it's corrupted by selfishness or, by ignorance, then the resulting state structure is just inherently doomed to fail. It doesn't matter how grand its monuments are or how advanced its technology might be.
that sets the stage perfectly. If the state is a reflection of the individual soul, then we have to begin at the very, very beginning. Where does that moral compass, the soul itself, find its true north?
Mm-hmm.
And that takes us right into the cosmic foundation of Al-Waily's framework, Section 1, faith, or al-iman,
Right.
and the eternal will.
Right. So if we're going to trace the chain of existence all the way back to its origin, Al-Waily posits this concept of the eternal will, or al-irada.
Al-irada.
And this isn't just an abstract philosophical starting point. It's defined as the ultimate source of all existence of wujud, and it's completely inseparable from God.
So this is the foundation, the ultimate non-material, infinite initiating force.
That's it. It's the ground upon which everything else rests.
That concept immediately feels very challenging to the partial, limited human mind to grasp, doesn't it? It suggests a vast, limitless field of truth that we can't fully perceive. So if al-irada is this absolute source, how does that infinite source, communicate with the finite material world that we all inhabit? There has to be some kind of interface.
And there is. That interface is the universal intellect, or al-am. It serves a really vital role.
Okay.
If you think of the eternal will as the infinite source of power, the universal intellect is like the perfect divine repository of all the noble qualities that permeate the universe.
So it's like a master blueprint, the perfect template of knowledge and virtue.
That's a great way to put it. It acts as the necessary bridge, translating the incomprehensible vastness of the eternal will into discernible objective truths that can, in theory, be accessed.
So we have the source, al-irada, and we have the perfect knowledge template, al-al-am. And then there's us, sitting here in the material world, just trying to make sense of things.
Mm-hmm.
That puts our own minds, the human intellect, al-aqwa al-juzi, into a very specific, and I have to say a somewhat humble role.
Precisely. Our human intellect is a partial, finite manifestation of that universal intellect. It's a fragment of the ultimate knowledge.
A piece of the whole.
Just a piece. And Al-Waily argues that the primary function of our intellect is essentially a detective mission.
A detective mission. I like that.
Yeah, its job is to decipher and comprehend the universal truths that are stored in that perfect domain. So when we seek knowledge, when we judge actions, when we try to define good or bad, our partial intellect is meant to be performing this constant, subtle comparison.
It's measuring what we perceive here and now against that perfect objective standard held within the universal intellect.
You got it. It's always checking back with the blueprint.
That fundamentally reframes intellectual activity, doesn't it? It means that thinking isn't just, solving practical problems. It's a moral obligation to align our limited understanding with the perfect template of the cosmos.
It is. It's a moral act.
But if we fail to maintain that connection, if we get lost in the details of the material world, that connection breaks down.
It does, and that's exactly where the practice of iman, of faith, becomes essential. Iman is not a passive mental subscription to a set of rules.
Not just checking a box.
No. Al-Waily defines it as a moral obligation and, crucially, a source of active good, of al-khair. It has to be a living belief that actively manifests in your actions and in sincere ritual practices, al-shu'air.
And the purpose of those rituals, then, isn't just tradition or ceremony. They're functional.
Yeah.
They are the actual mechanisms for maintaining that connection to the universal intellect.
Absolutely. Think of prayer or worship as essential maintenance, like tuning an instrument. These sincere rituals serve to keep the heart and mind perpetually connected to the ultimate source of good.
Okay.
They reinforce the human intellect's capacity to discern truth and to maintain that alignment that's necessary for virtue. Without them, the human mind tends to default to its partial, self-serving nature. It loses sight of the universal good.
So if that connection is so essential, what happens when Iman becomes deficient? What are the consequences of letting that vital guardrail fall?
A deficient iman exposes the individual to the corruption of the soul. Al-Waily is very, very clear on this. If that connection to the source of good is weak, the person's ritual practices, the outward forms, they become just superficial traditions.
Empty gestures.
Empty gestures. They lack any genuine moral impact. They are just motions without inner substance, offering no real protection against temptation or corruption or moral error. The individual becomes highly vulnerable because their internal moral detector, which should be constantly checking the universal blueprint, is disconnected. It's offline.
Wow. Now this brings us to one of the most provocative sections of Al-Waili's work, his critique of atheism, or al-ilhad. He doesn't treat it merely as an absence of faith.
No, he sees it as a severe functional failure of the intellect itself.
A failure of the intellect. How so?
Al-Waily portrays atheism as a kind of intellectual surrender. It's a self-imposed prison that's defined by the limits of the material world. He argues that atheists deny the existence of the source, of the Masdar al-Wujud, because they choose to stop their philosophical inquiry at the boundary.
The boundary of the finite, tangible, material world, the Mada al-Azaliyah.
Exactly. They put a fence around their own thinking, and they conclude that anything they can't measure with a ruler or perceive with their five senses simply does not exist.
But if you're stopping at the limits of the material world, which is, by its very nature, temporary, it's flawed, it's constantly in motion,
Yeah.
what are the inevitable societal and psychological consequences of making that intellectual choice?
Well, the consequences, according to this analysis, are profound. Despair, pessimism, and the destruction of hope for the future.
Why? Why that specifically?
Because if the material world, which is characterized by struggle and decay and the ultimate certainty of annihilation, if that's all there is, then life is defined only by its limitations. Even great material success is fleeting. The text explicitly links this materialist worldview, this philosophical confinement, to the profound and widespread sorrow and sense of existential loss that we can observe in many contemporary societies, despite their unprecedented material wealth.
I see. So the ultimate intellectual failure isn't just about denying a creator, it's about denying the very possibility of an objective, eternal good. And in doing so, robbing human life of any transcendent meaning.
You're trapping us in the cycle of entropy. That's what it is.
Right.
And this is where the foundational strength of true Iman provides the antidote. It acts as the ultimate compensation for all the shortcomings and the temporal nature of worldly life.
How so?
By connecting the individual to eternal existence and divine mercy, it provides a firm, unwavering foundation for true, lasting happiness, sa'ada. Without this anchor, any worldly failure, whether it's financial or relational or physical, it becomes an absolute catastrophe. It leads to that deep, deep sense of loss.
So the goal isn't just temporary contentment. It's reaching a level of certainty, al-yakin al-mutlaq, that transcends the need for constant material evidence.
Exactly.
Faith is the cosmic energy source that powers the whole system. Okay, so if that's the what and the why, the next section, ethics, provides the how for the individual to live rightly.
It does. It brings it right down to the human level.
So if faith provides that cosmic foundation, then ethics, al-akhlaq, is the core structure that we build upon it. And this is where Al-Waily introduces a truly memorable metaphor. It's one that defines the relationship between moral integrity and national achievement.
Oh yeah, the soul and the body.
Exactly.
This is truly the centerpiece of his entire civilizational critique. He compares culture, thakafa, to the soul, the ru,
Okay, culture is the soul.
and civilization, or hadara, and by that he means the material aspects like infrastructure, technology, economic systems. That is the body, the
And
jism.
so the towering skyscrapers, the fast trains, the immense GDP, that's all just the body.
That's the body.
And the state of the body is entirely secondary to the health of the soul.
Mm.
But where does akhlaq, where do ethics fit into this image?
Akhlaq is described as the very door to civilization, the Bab al-Hadara.
The door.
The door. If a society has profound, deeply ingrained ethics, the material aspects, the body will naturally follow as a secondary positive consequence. Material progress built on a foundation of moral strength is sustainable.
But there's a warning there.
A profound warning. If ethics fail, the civilization collapses from within, regardless of its material achievements.
That directly challenges how we measure success today. I mean, we measure GDP, technological innovation, military power. Those are all body metrics.
All of them.
Al-Waily is suggesting a civilization can be materially wealthy, but suffer from a catastrophic spiritual poverty, a fuck al-ru.
It's a complete indictment of pure materialism. The implication is that the material existence of a country is fundamentally worthless if its morality is corrupt.
Worthless.
Yes, akhlaq is superior to material wealth because material wealth, if it's unchecked by virtue, simply becomes a tool for self-destruction. Imagine a technologically advanced society where every single citizen is relentlessly cynical, selfish, and motivated only by short-term gain.
That system can't last.
It cannot endure no matter how many rockets it launches.
That makes perfect sense. The goal then becomes cultivating that strong moral soul. And that process isn't passive. It involves a complex, continuous interaction between our rational side and our emotional side. How does Al-Waily describe that internal dynamic?
He describes a system where the intellect has to actively manage the emotions. We're introduced to the conscience, al-damir, which acts as the internal moral compass.
So the conscience is the internal monitor.
It is, and it demands consistency between one's intentions, what they believe is good, and their external actions. It's the watchdog ensuring personal integrity.
So the intellect is essentially the master gardener of our internal landscape. It's discerning which emotions to foster and which to, prune back.
Exactly. Ethics requires the intellect to distinguish and to regulate. Positive emotions, compassion, rama, affection, mawada, kindness, lif, these are beneficial because they contribute to virtue and social cohesion. They must be encouraged.
And the negative ones?
Conversely, negative emotions, hatred, jealousy, arrogance, kibria, they have to be rigorously controlled.
But controlling them doesn't mean eliminating them entirely, does it? I mean, some emotions, like a righteous anger at injustice, seem necessary for moral action.
That's a crucial distinction. The goal isn't some kind of stoic apathy, it's synergy. True moral character is achieved when those positive emotions are supported by the intellect, ensuring they contribute to virtue without leading to excess or imbalance.
So the intellect makes sure our emotional responses are productive.
And that they're aimed at the universal good. For example, compassion that's untethered from rational thought can lead to poor, unsustainable decisions.
Right.
But compassion guided by intellect becomes justice.
Let's circle back to the relationship between faith and ethics. We discussed iman as the foundation, the guardrail. How does the tree analogy illustrate this protective relationship?
The analogy is very clear and very powerful. Akhlaq, ethics, is the deep, fundamental root structure of an individual's character. It's what you genuinely are deep down.
Okay, the roots.
And iman, faith, is the guard, or the watchdog, the rada, that protects the health of those roots.
I see.
So ethics without faith is like a tree without deeply protected roots. It might look green and healthy on the surface, but it's easily toppled by the strong winds of moral trials, temptations, or systemic corruption. Iman gives the roots the strength to withstand the inevitable storms of life.
And what's the ultimate result of this synergy? What does the complete moral personality look like in practice?
This individual is one who prioritizes the good of others, whose external actions align perfectly with their internal moral beliefs. And Al-Waily stresses that this person is secure against the biggest societal viruses like bribery or corruption.
Why?
Because they possess a deeply rooted moral self-monitoring system, a rakib. They don't need external enforcement or surveillance. Their conscience, reinforced by their faith, functions as the ultimate internal regulator. It makes them, in essence, morally immune to external pressures aimed at compromise.
This leads us naturally to the three distinct levels of moral action that he outlines, especially that highest level defined by self-sacrifice, al-tadiyah. It seems the moral barometer is set incredibly high here.
It is. It's a very strict definition of goodness. The three levels are high, which requires profound self-sacrifice, al-tadiyya, for the greater good.
Okay.
Then there's intermediate, which is consistent, moderate virtue, and finally, low, which is just base morality driven primarily by immediate personal benefit.
But surely some level of self-interest, of athara, is necessary for survival, right? If a person entirely sacrifices their own needs, they might cease to exist, and then they can't contribute to the community at all.
And Al-Waily acknowledges that. He says a degree of self-interest is necessary for human survival, and it can't be wholly condemned. However, the critique gets very sharp when that self-interest is prioritized over the common good, especially by those in power.
Right.
The truly virtuous person, the fadhil, demonstrates the highest moral level by being willing to sacrifice their personal comfort, their time, or even their safety for the community's welfare.
So that's the benchmark.
That is the crucial benchmark. Using your personal resources, your time, or your effort to bolster the community, rather than using the community as a means to accumulate personal wealth or status.
So we have the root structure, the virtuous individual. If the health of society depends on cultivating millions of these morally secure, virtuous individuals, how do we do it? How do we plant and cultivate the next generation?
Mm-hmm.
And that takes us into the practical societal mechanism of upright upbringing.
Yes, upright upbringing, al-tarbiyya, is the first and most practical foundation of a good society. It is the engine that translates all these philosophical ideals into tangible moral behavior in the next generation.
The engine, I like that.
And Al-Waily argues that this task can't just be delegated to a single body. It relies on the alignment and the synergy of three critical institutions.
The three pillars of societal health: the home, al-bayt; the school, al-madrasa; and the street, or society, al-shari. And that word synergy is key here.
It's absolutely vital. The text emphasizes that these three pillars must work in harmony, because if even one of them is corrupt, it hinders the success of the others.
Can you give us an example of how that breaks down?
Sure, consider this scenario. The home instills basic values like honesty and respect. The school teaches ethical frameworks and academic knowledge. But then the street, the broader society, the media, the political environment is just permeated by cynicism, dishonesty, and the celebration of fraud.
So the youth is caught between the ideal taught in the first two environments and the reality they see in the third.
And they will inevitably gravitate toward the behavior that seems to be rewarded in the real world. The moral education fails to take root.
It's seen as naive.
Exactly. If they see corrupt politicians and wealthy criminals being celebrated on the street, all the lessons of the home and school are quickly discarded as impractical fantasies. All three environments have to work together to cultivate strong moral character.
So parents and educators have to be vigilant, not just in their own spheres, but about the general moral tone of the whole society.
They do. They have to be.
Let's talk about the specific instruction parents must provide, the wasaya. If we're talking about building a morally bulletproof character, what are the non-negotiable elements of that moral curriculum?
The parental guidance is detailed, and it aims at implanting values that prioritize the eternal and the communal over the temporary self.
Okay, what are they?
The core duties include the love of God, of course, the love of the homeland, hub al-watan, obedience to parents, honesty, contentment, kana, and respect for scholars and the righteous.
That concept of hub al-watan, love of the homeland, seems especially important in this framework. It's not just patriotism, is it? It seems to imply a moral duty to the collective good of the physical society you inhabit.
It is a profoundly ethical duty. Hub al-Watan means recognizing your community as an extended family that requires protection and contribution, and it often demands that self-sacrifice, the tatiyya we discussed earlier.
It's the opposite of viewing your country as just a resource to be exploited for personal gain.
The absolute antithesis. When this love is successfully implanted, it ensures that the youth, when they become adults, will prioritize the national welfare over their own individual profit.
And kana, contentment, that acts as a crucial internal defense, doesn't it?
Contentment is essential. It's a moral safeguard against the two great vices that ruin governance: greed and excessive, uncontrolled ambition.
How so?
Contentment teaches the individual to be satisfied with sufficiency. A person who is content is difficult to bribe. They're difficult to manipulate with promises of luxury. And they're less likely to pursue power purely for the accumulation of status or wealth.
It ensures that future leaders approach their roles with a sense of service, not entitlement.
Exactly. It keeps their motivations pure.
So the education system, the school, has to reinforce all of this. The mission of education, then, can never be divorced from ethics.
Never. Al-Waily's model views education as serving a dual purpose. Practical preparation for life, yes, but also moral cultivation. It has to teach the youth to distinguish good from evil and truth from falsehood, with an unwavering focus on public and private benefit.
So it's not enough just to teach mathematics.
No. The student must also understand the ethical implications of wealth distribution and economic justice. Education has to instill the capacity for ethical decision-making that benefits the greater society. It ensures that technical skill is always guided by a moral purpose.
This brings us back forcefully to that earlier warning about material success that lacks a moral foundation. We see so many examples globally where technological progress just outpaces ethical development.
And this is the warning that he reiterates constantly. Material advancement, unprecedented wealth, overwhelming technological capability can never compensate for a lack of a clock.
It's not a substitute.
Not at all. Al-Waily stresses that a civilization rooted merely in material comfort, driven by short-sighted desire and just devoid of virtue, is inherently fleeting. It lacks internal integrity. You can build as high as you want, but if the foundation is rotting, the building will fall.
So the long-term perspective of this Al-Tarbiyah is to guarantee that material progress will serve good, rather than becoming a weapon of oppression or self-destruction.
Absolutely. The entire purpose of securing the moral essence of civilization, the soul, is to guarantee that material progress is guided by righteousness, by justice, and by the common welfare. If education only focuses on how to build better technology or how to make more profit, without teaching the moral restraint and responsibility required, then those advancements simply accelerate the eventual moral and societal collapse. The soul must be secured first.
And when those individuals, rooted in faith and characterized by self-sacrificing ethics, enter the political arena, they fundamentally redefine the purpose of power.
They have to.
That's the seamless transition we need. From the cultivation of the soul to the management of the state, al-siyasa.
Exactly. Governance al-siyasa is the ultimate test of a society's moral foundation. It is the practical application of akhlaq at the national level.
The rubber meets the road.
It does. And if the ethics of the individual are strong, the resulting political system must be just and beneficial. The very first requirement Al-Waily sets out is the selection criteria for leadership.
Okay, so the ideal ruler needs a dual mandate. Competence, kafa, and wisdom, hikmah. It can't be one or the other.
It can't.
They have to possess deep practical knowledge of complex systems, the economy, the law, social dynamics, culture. But all of that knowledge has to be tempered by wisdom, which is rooted in ethics.
The combination is essential because without competence, the leader fails through error, but without wisdom and ethics, they fail through malice.
And Al-Waily highlights the gravest danger to the state, the rule of the ignorant, al-jahil. But he identifies two distinct types of deficient rulers, and both are catastrophic.
That's right. It's important to distinguish them.
Let's elaborate on those two types because they represent different dimensions of the failure of competence and character.
Okay, the first type is the obvious danger. The ruler who is profoundly ignorant of the complexities of governance, but is so arrogant that they believe themselves to be competent.
Right, they don't know what they don't.
And they don't care. They rule based on impulse, ego, and wishful thinking, and they lead the state into crises they don't even understand. They are dangerous through sheer incompetence and hubris.
But the second type is often more insidious, because they can appear functional on paper. This is the ruler who is technically knowledgeable, a skilled economist or a brilliant lawyer, but is fundamentally morally corrupt.
And this is the greater danger. Al-Waily warns that knowledge without ethics leads inevitably to corruption and ruin, but it does so with extreme efficiency.
Wow.
A technically brilliant but selfish ruler can manipulate laws, siphon off national wealth, and oppress citizens far more effectively than a mere fool. In this framework, deep knowledge combined with selfishness, with anania, is the most destructive force a state can face.
Because it executes evil with ruthless precision.
And often masks it behind legitimate-sounding policy.
So if that is the danger, the purpose of politics must be fundamentally different from how it's often practiced today. It's not an arena for personal accumulation or deceit.
Not at all. Politics is defined as the practice of public service, khidma amma. Its sole legitimate aim is to advance the welfare and prosperity, the ragda of the nation, and to ensure comprehensive justice, adl.
So a true political system must be judged not by the power or wealth it accumulates for the governing elite.
But by how effectively it manages and serves the collective common good. Governance is an act of stewardship over the moral and material assets of the nation.
What happens when that ethical foundation collapses and politics becomes entirely focused on self-interest? This is the calamity of corrupt governance.
When politics devolves into a search for personal wealth and status, it triggers a societal disaster, a kritha. Corrupt rulers are inherently selfish, and they create this destructive feedback loop.
How does that loop work?
They attract dishonest flatterers and sycophants who mirror their own greed, while simultaneously driving away the honest, competent scholars and experts, the very people needed to run the complex machinery of the state ethically.
So it creates a vacuum of virtue.
It does. It leaves only those who benefit from the corruption and power.
And the consequences of that.
Political systems based on selfishness and moral corruption lead the country backward. The consequences are immediate and severe. An environment of fear, of darkness, thalum, and pervasive injustice replaces safety, and public welfare. And the true state of affairs is often masked by these false appearances of piety or competence, which Al-Waily warns the vigilant citizen must look past. If you see injustice and the flight of the wise, you know the moral soul of the state is decaying.
That sets a very high bar for leadership integrity. How does Al-Waily reconcile the demands of leading a complex nation with the philosophical ideal of detachment or true asceticism, zuhd?
Well, that's a great question.
I mean, we often associate asceticism with poverty, which seems incompatible with running a powerful state.
Right. And zuhd, or detachment, in a leader, is highly valued, but it has to be properly defined. Al-Waily is clear. It is not about demanding the leader live in abject poverty or completely deny all of life's necessities.
That would be an excess.
It would be, and it could damage their ability to function effectively.
So what does practical integrity or true political zuhd actually look like?
True zuhd is the leader's demonstrated ability to prioritize public good over private wealth. It's the capacity to maintain dignity and self-respect karma without being corrupted by excessive ambition or the pursuit of luxury that separates them from the people they serve.
So it's about their internal motivation.
It is. It's the ability to use their position solely for the benefit of the people and to be content with sufficiency, with kana, rather than constantly seeking personal gain or opulent luxury. It functions as a necessary moral boundary, ensuring that the leader's motivations remain pure service, not self-enrichment.
That is the ultimate form of competence, then. Ensuring the entire apparatus of the state serves the soul of civilization, its ethics, rather than merely serving its own self-interest.
Precisely.
But even a morally secure state must contend with external forces of decay. And that leads us to the final challenge: combating evil.
Right. We've established that virtue isn't passive, it's an active force. Al-Waily emphasizes that moral strength is required for a dual struggle. First, you have to control your own base desires, which is a continuous internal battle.
And second,
Second, you have to actively combat external evil, or shar.
it's the philosophical idea that degradation is like a contagious disease. Moral decay spreads rapidly if it's not actively and collectively resisted by the righteous elements of society.
Absolutely. If the good are weak or fragmented or complacent, then evil will naturally predominate, because evil is often unified in its pursuit of short-term gain. The power of good needs to be united and resolute to overcome the power of evil, which often appears stronger and more decisive because it is unrestrained by conscience.
How does the virtuous person distinguish themselves from those who are arrogant or haughty, the al-mutakabirin, who so often manipulate systems to gain power?
The key contrast is humility and service. The truly virtuous person is humble and seeks to serve the community. The arrogant seek power for self-exaltation and control.
But the arrogant can be deceptive.
Oh, yes. Al-Waily warns that the wicked frequently use false external appearances of piety or goodness to mask their internal corruption. They know how to perform virtue when it serves their purpose. And this brings us to the necessity of vigilance.
Vigilance, then, isn't about paranoia. It's about careful, long-term observation of behavior, especially among leaders.
Precisely. The text stresses that the true nature of a person, especially someone in a high position, is revealed over time through their consistent actions and their unwavering commitment to justice.
So you can't be fooled by short-term wins.
Superficial rhetoric or short-term, flashy successes cannot hide a deeply corrupt character forever. Vigilance means seeking truth through persistent observation of the outcome of their policies and their commitment to the vulnerable, rather than being swayed by marketing or temporary displays of power.
This implies that purifying society is a patient, continuous, long-term strategy. It's not a single revolution or a quick policy change.
It requires patience and continuous effort, and it has to start with the individual's inner struggle against negative hereditary traits or acquired vices.
From the inside out.
The effort to purify society from evil is continuous, demanding that righteous scholars, wise citizens, and ethical leaders never stop struggling against corruption and ignorance, which are the primary root causes of moral decay. The entire mission of Al-Tarbiyah and Al-Siyasa is to raise the mustawa al-akhlaq, the moral level of the entire society.
So when we synthesize this entire journey, from the foundation of the eternal will through the structure of ethics and into the management system of governance, what is the ultimate concluding thought Al-Waily leaves us with?
The ultimate success of any national project, be it economic, political, or cultural, is entirely contingent upon the moral character of its participants, particularly its leaders.
It all comes back to akhlaq.
Every time. Civilization without ethics is, as we established with the soul and body metaphor, just mere decoration waiting to crumble. Al-Waily's interpretation confirms that ancient Confucian wisdom, strong virtues, are the only creators of strong societies. If a society prioritizes its material body over its ethical soul, it is condemning itself to inevitable self-destruction.
This is a profound challenge to modern notions of progress. We spend billions optimizing our supply chains and our technology. But if we don't first optimize our moral foundation, all those efforts are ultimately undermined by corruption and self-interest.
They are.
We've learned that these three concepts, faith, ethics, and governance, are utterly interlocking. You cannot separate them without destroying the whole structure.
They create a necessary self-reinforcing system. Iman provides the non-material anchor. Akhlaq determines the integrity of the individual, and that integrity then determines the success and justice of siyasa. We are forced to look beyond GDP, beyond technological prowess, beyond military strength, and instead focus on the essential, invisible moral health of the populace as the true measure of a civilization's value and its longevity.
A truly powerful synthesis. Now, we established earlier that upright upbringing requires the synergy of the home, the school, and the street. And while we often feel helpless regarding the first two, the government and the education system, the street, your immediate social environment, is where you hold direct influence.
It is, and this raises an important question for you, the learner. If upright upbringing is a shared responsibility and moral degradation spreads rapidly, what small, consistent, and active steps can you take today to improve the street in your own community? How can you become that necessary small unit of moral strength that contributes to the overall societal harmony, actively combating the cynicism and self-interest that Al-Waily warns against?
That is the application of true active virtue. Deciding today to be the moral anchor that keeps the system from drifting. Think about that responsibility. Till next time, keep digging deep.